The Chicago Bears were supposed to get healthier during their bye week, and while they're getting some key starters back, there are other starters that might end up missing the Commanders game with new injuries.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. On the show today, I want to go through the Bears injury report and look at who could be back and provide a big boost, especially to this Chicago Bears defense, but also a couple names that could be out, including a couple that we really weren't expecting to be out, plus a couple others that we were hoping would be back in time for Washington, but after an extra week off, they're still not making the progress we want to see, and I think it's not looking great for playing on Monday. We'll look at what their options are to fill in for those players or replace for those players and what that'll affect on the actual on-the-field performance in this game. But I think we should start with a little bit more like the positives of like what we knew would be coming this week, that Kyler Gordon has said publicly he is playing on Monday night. I think he was technically listed as limited in the injury report on Thursday, but he is pretty definitively claiming, not even just in Instagram posts, but in press conference, I am making my season debut Monday night against the Commanders. And then also along with him, linebacker TJ Edwards, full participant in practice, should be good to go. And those two guys are going to be really key, important players to add back into this defense in more than one way. Like, it's easy to say, well, yeah, Kyler Gordon's back, so you're going to cover better. And you know, certainly TJ Edwards is a better coverage linebacker than Noah Sewell. But I really think the bigger impact from both of them is going to be in the running game. Especially, I think Kyler is an underrated run defender. And from that slot cornerback position, he's a lot closer to the ball, to the line of scrimmage, to the play, than like an outside cornerback like Jalen Johnson, who and Tyreek Stevenson too, like who both do get involved in the running play. But you know, when you're running between the tackles, cornerbacks are usually hanging out with wide receivers and not really getting that involved. But Gordon from the slot is not only just generally an aggressive downhill player, but someone who isn't afraid of getting dirty in there. And I think he can represent a huge upgrade over Nick McLeod in the running game and fill some of those gaps on the edge, even if it's just being in the right place to direct the ball carrier back into the arms of the linebackers in the middle of the field. That is really, really important in run defense. And it's really important that those arms he's directing them back to are someone like TJ Edwards, and instead of Noah Sewell, you know, running game is definitely more of his strength and he hits gaps correctly, but through the first 4 games of the season prior to the bye week was the NFL's leading missed tackler among linebackers, was tied, I think, for first place with the most missed tackles. Like, that stuff is not the only reason the Bears' run defense has been bad, but it takes, you know, a 4-yard gain and turns it into a 6 or an 8-yard gain when they get those extra yards after that missed tackle that someone like Noah Sewell was making. So if it's Edwards and Edmonds in there, you just feel like the tackling is going to be a little bit better. It doesn't solve all the running game issues because Edmonds has still struggled to find the right gaps, and the defensive line has struggled to really kind of hold the line of scrimmage and not get pushed back into the second level. But I do think it will make a important difference, right? It's somewhere between game changer and not at all. It's a middle level of defense, because at the end of the day, the Commanders are still the number 1 ranked rushing offense in football, and the Bears are still 32nd in running. Like, you could have a fully healthy Bears defense with no injuries, and I still think you're probably going to struggle to stop this running game. But then you add in a couple of injuries that we'll talk about a little bit later on, of guys who you were hoping would be back or didn't even realize would be injured, and there's a couple other defensive starters that are missing practice and not a good side towards playing, that kind of start to balance or tip the scales back of like, you're gaining Kyler Gordon and TJ Edwards, but you're losing elsewhere, and that's going to be a little bit of a problem. I will throw in one other like positive return here that I guess we were expecting, but we weren't positive, is the Bears activated Austin Booker's window to practice coming off of injured reserve. And that doesn't mean instantly, he's going to play in the next game. He had to miss a minimum of 4 games before you could come off of injured reserve. But at practice on Thursday, he was a full participant in practice, still technically on injured reserve. They have not removed him from that. But the fact that he is a full participant, not just limited or even still practicing, but not a full participant at all, like suggests that in theory, he should be good to go for Monday's game. I guess we don't know that officially, but it's a really positive trend there. And similarly, like I don't think Austin Booker is going to fix the Bears pass rush and come in and be this, take over the game type of playmaker on the defensive line. But I do think having another fresh body in there with some explosiveness can absolutely go a long way towards, that group playing a little better, even if it's just like 1 or 2 splash plays a game, a pressure here, a hit there, maybe a sack every once in a while. That can be a big energy boost for this group because, we've seen the rotation with Montez Sweat and Dio Dengbo not be good enough. I mean, through and through. I think they haven't been terrible, but the expectations are higher than that, and they have not met those expectations for sure. And then like the backups, Tano Passanio and Dominic Robinson, they're not great players. Like ideally, you wouldn't really want either one of them being a big part of your rotation, but for the Bears, they're like next men up. And so if Booker can come in and try and offer you a little bit more and just something different, a little bit more speed, like he doesn't have as much size as those guys, which Dennis Allen tends to prefer the size at the edge rusher position. So I'm curious to see how he fits into the rotation here. Like I'm not expecting Booker to come in and play 50% of the snaps, come in and give you 25 snaps in this game. A, he's coming off injured reserve and hasn't played all season. But like B, does Dennis Allen trust him fully at maybe being a little bit undersized and a second-year player and someone who is hurt? Like I think it'll be a little bit lighter in terms of Booker's initial usage, and he might have to earn more playing time from there, despite the things he showed in the preseason and the flashes that were there. Like it's a different ball game when we hit into the regular season. And one of the like smaller storylines here is that because Booker is on injured reserve and Travis Homer is also activated practice from injured reserve, when you promote them to your active roster to allow them to play, you are going to have to take somebody else's 53-man roster spot from somewhere. And maybe you look at this defensive line and say, are they going to keep 6 healthy defensive ends? And then, they've got 5 defensive tackles on the roster right now. Are they going to have 11 defensive linemen on this roster? Or do they cut Daniel Hardy? Do they cut Dominic Robinson? I mean, they weren't afraid to cut Tano Passanio after the regular season ended, after the preseason ended. He started the year in the practice squad. So maybe they cut him and put Booker in that spot. There's going to be some kind of corresponding roster move that has to be made there. And I'm curious to see, how much depth they keep on the defensive line, or whether you just, do you just cut Ja'Day Walker at wide receiver to keep an extra defensive lineman? I mean, you got to keep depth where you need it, and maybe you don't need it at wide receiver quite as much. But maybe they look at this and say, hey, they've got another big injury on the defensive line, so you're not going to have as healthy of a group there. So maybe you keep all 11, knowing that one of the 10 is not going to be available. So we'll take a look at, or I guess we don't know for sure if he isn't going to be available, but one of the 11 is in doubt, we'll say. So we'll look at the impact of Grady Jarrett's lingering injury, plus a couple of other key starters that you're really worried about not having out there on Monday, next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. If you need parts fast for a project, Supply House has next day delivery. Talk about a game changer. And their parts finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. Join their free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use our promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. So while Kyler Gordon and TJ Edwards and maybe even Austin Booker coming back against the Commanders should provide a real boost to the Bears defense, there will be some counterbalancing losses due to injury that I think will, leave them at best like a net neutral and maybe even a net negative. We'll see how it kind of plays out. Like one of them is Grady Jarrett, who we mentioned, who missed the last game, so it's not as though this is like a brand new where is this one coming from? But still concerning in the middle of your defensive line when you're going up against the number one rushing offense in football in yards per carry, and you have the number 32nd rush defense in terms of yards per carry this season. Like you're giving up 6 a carry, they're averaging 6 a carry, and that's not going to mesh well, especially if you're missing a starter on your defensive line on the interior of your defensive line. I think the good news here, which sounds like the least good news, like the good news here is that Grady Jarrett wasn't playing that well, so maybe you're not missing as much as you thought you would be, but like still healthy veteran player, better than not having said healthy veteran player. Like there's still a feeling like Grady Jarrett can get back to playing a higher level of football any given week now, and maybe this injury had been building up and lingering before it was bad enough to keep him out of games that was affecting his quality of play the whole time. But Jarrett's absence will mean, well, again, he did not practice on Thursday ahead of this Commanders game. And maybe the big picture conversation here is like, hey, you've had an extra week to get healthy. So like if you went through all of last week and now we were to Thursday and you're still not able to practice, I find it hard to believe that like in those 10 days since the last game, you haven't gotten better. But in these final 4 days before the next game, you're all of a sudden going to get healthy again. So like they haven't ruled out Grady Jarrett despite him not practicing. They haven't ruled out a couple other guys who haven't practiced. Like we won't know until Saturday their game designations if they're out or doubtful or questionable. But I feel kind of like the guys that are not practicing after having a week off tells me I'm not super confident in them being out there. And so presumably we would see Andrew Billings start at nose tackle with Javon Dexter at the 3 technique, and then they'll rotate in Chris Williams and Shamar Turner. I mean, I suppose, could they look to try and bolster that depth a little bit with somebody off the practice squad like Jonathan Ford as another nose tackle? I think they called him up for the last game. Could see that as a potential option there. But I find myself feeling more concerned about Jaquan Brisker not practicing on Thursday. That injury seemingly out of nowhere all of a sudden. And then Darnell Wright not practicing on Thursday. We'll throw Kyle Monangai also in there, but we'll talk about him a little bit more in a second here. But let's start with Jaquan Brisker, because as far as I can remember, he played every snap, or he was, the injury wasn't something that knocked him out of the game in the middle of the game against the Raiders. As far as I remember, I don't remember him leaving abruptly and having a backup come in and play the remainder of the snaps. As I look back at the game, Jaquan Brisker played 52 out of the 52 defensive snaps. He did not miss a snap against the Raiders. And so it's concerning that player plays a whole game, then you have a bye week, and now he's not practicing due to the quad injury. So, I mean, unless it's hey, he just tweaked something on Tuesday, and so he's not ready Thursday, but he'll be ready on Monday. That's kind of wishful thinking, best case scenario. But I really don't like the idea of going against Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury and Deebo Samuel with presumably Kevin Byard and Elijah Hicks or Jonathan Owens. We'll see how they want to prioritize those guys. They've been using Jonathan Owens as the third safety in dime packages, so presumably I would think he's next man up there. But either way, I'm not a big fan of having Jaquan Brisker out and a backup safety in there when you've already got a backup cornerback replacing Jalen Johnson in there too. It just scares me a little bit. Kind of like how having a backup rookie right tackle making his first career NFL start in place of Darnell Wright would also be a particularly scary proposition here. I should mention briefly on Jaquan Brisker, you only have 4 safeties on the roster right now: Brisker, Byard, Hicks, Owens. If Brisker can't go, presumably they're going to need a 4th safety somewhere in there. So they probably call up on the practice squad. They have a former 7th round pick from the Giants by the name of Gervarius Owens, who's been on Giants practice squad, Titans practice squad last season, and then was with the Vikings during training camp and then waived, and now he's been on the Bears practice squad since the start of the season. Like, I guess that's the next backup to be called up there. But again, just have not felt good about the safety depth all offseason. And it's fine when your guys are healthy, but we know Jaquan Brisker has an injury history, but that's all been concussions. This is not related, so hopefully this is not something that's going to be any kind of long-term serious thing. But still, when you have a whole bye week and you're not practicing on Thursday, it gets me nervous about the safety position. Obviously, the Darnell Wright thing is a little bit less of a surprise, considering we knew the injury was kind of an issue against the Raiders, came out of the game, and we saw, Trapillo filling in for him, and it's like, okay, you wondered how serious that would be, but you thought bye week, get healthier, good to go against the Commanders, and so far, that's not the case, and still time for him to practice and be ready to go on Sunday, but I think we got to prepare for the possibility that it is Ozzie Trapillo's first career start. Fortunately, I guess not his first career snaps in the regular season, but first career start against the Washington Commanders. And a Commanders defensive line that lacks a little bit of like star power in terms of like names that you still recognize. I mean, they have Von Miller, but he's 36. I mean, he's still playing well, but he's a rotational guy. But like Dorrance Armstrong for them has been a bit of a revelation. He's got 5 sacks in 5 games this season. He's averaging a sack per game. We heard more about him and this Commanders defensive line on yesterday's Crossover Thursday podcast with David Harrison from Locked On Commanders. So go take a listen to that if you have not heard it. But like, it's him, it's Von Miller in rotation. Former Bear Jacob Martin plays the edge for them and has actually been a nice little find for them. He's nothing, not a Pro Bowl guy or anything, but he's playing better for Washington than he ever did for the Chicago Bears. So like all of a sudden, the Commanders don't have a pass rush that like jumps out at you as, wow, this is going to be a really tough matchup. It's not like Max Crosby is over there really scaring you, but like they got enough decent players and a good enough defense that like, yeah, I'm worried about Theo Bennett's first ever start at left tackle and Ozzie Trapillo's first ever start at right tackle. And I would be worried about that almost regardless of opponent. But then when you see that the Commanders have been generating sacks and getting pretty good pressure with guys that you're maybe not the most familiar with, it just kind of worries you that much more. And you wonder how much that can derail what you want to do in the passing game. And then I guess you got to see how these guys block in the running game. I think there's a hope that Bennett can be a better run blocker than Braxton Jones was, but I'm not thinking we're getting better blocking from Trapillo than we were from Darnell Wright. So it just feels to me like, yes, you're getting Kyler Gordon and T.J. Edwards back and maybe Austin Booker, and that's great. But man, if you're missing Brisker, Jarrett, and Darnell Wright, which is no guarantee, but like if you're missing those 3 guys, I'm not sure you're a better football team than you were before. Like you would rather have like you're better off not having all of them out. Like, yes, you're happy to have those 3 guys back, even if you have other 3 guys out. Like you'd rather have, instead of having all 6 out, at least you get 3 guys back to try and balance it out. But I'm not sure like, oh, hey, we're coming out of the bye week and the Bears are so much healthier and they're going to play way better football because of how much healthier they've gotten. It's like they'll get better in the ways that Gordon and Edwards and maybe Booker can make them better, but they're going to get worse in the areas if Brisker's out, if Jarrett's out again, and if Darnell Wright is out again. That it's just sort of like moving the problems to somewhere else. So we'll see how that stacks up for them on Monday night. But there's a few other names in the middle here that could be back, could be out, kind of are closer to question marks at this stage of the process that can also, we talk about the scales of like injury gains and injury losses. I mean, if these guys are all back and healthy and good to go, maybe you do tilt a little bit more in the positive side. So we'll take a look at what we know about their options at running back, tight end, and even another spot on the offensive line. That's next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and you'll get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, just pick a bet, Put down $5, and if your bet wins, not only do you get the winnings from that $5 bet, but you're also going to get an extra $300 in bonus bets that you can use on other games, prop bets, other sports, anywhere in FanDuel, you name it, they've got it. So say you want to put $5 on this Bears-Commanders game. Spread is Bears plus 4.5, so 4.5-point underdogs on the road right now. If you want to bet the Bears straight up to win head-to-head, the money line is Bears plus 188, so you get some extra money on that bet. And then the over-under is set at 49.5 points in the point total. So a $5 bet on any of those or any other game, and boom, you hit it. You're getting your $300 in bonus bets. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. So generally, I think it looks discouraging for Jarrett, for Brisker, for Darnell Wright at this early stage in the process. Just as it looks very encouraging for Kyler Gordon and TJ Edwards and Austin Booker. Few other guys falling somewhere in between, where it's kind of hard to say this early in the process, but their availability could swing things strongly in one direction or another. So a couple of names to mention on the injury report. First of all, we touched on it briefly earlier. Kyle Monangai did not practice on Thursday with a thigh injury. That's a real concern, just as much as some of those other guys. But you've got running back Travis Homer activated his practice window, and he was a full participant in practice. So it appears Travis Homer should, quote unquote, should be back and good to go. And maybe just at the perfect time if Kyle Monangai is not back and good to go. But then the other two names that were limited at practice on Thursday, tight end Colston Loveland with a hip injury that we know about, and then right guard Jonah Jackson pops up with a rib injury and was limited at practice. And now we're in a little bit of like, uh-oh territory with that spot in particular. Like, it's one thing to have a rookie right tackle making his first career start and a second-year left tackle making his first career start at left tackle in his early NFL progress. But then if you add on a limited Jonah Jackson, I mean, we can even put aside, if he's limited on Thursday, presumably he should play. Like, is he going to get worse from Thursday to Friday to Saturday? And probably not. But if Jonah Jackson has not been great, and now you make him whatever it's going to be, 70% of Jonah Jackson, 80% of Jonah Jackson, like, boy, you were hoping for at least some stability on the interior right now, while you've got what can only be instability on the outside of the offensive line between benchings and injuries, or benching and injury, I guess, singular, for both of those two things. So, like, that's a real concern for me. Like, you can help out a rookie right tackle by sliding the guard over to help him a little bit more. But if that guard's not healthy either, then that becomes a lot more of a problem. You can also help the tackles with tight ends staying in help. But if that tight end is Colston Loveland and he's still recovering from the hip injury, and you want him to chip on Dorrance Armstrong, and it's like, hey, can you put a hip check into Dorrance Armstrong? Well, no, not that hip, because that hip is the one that's caused him to miss the last game and be limited at practice. Like, it's those kind of little things that I think can go a long way. Like, even if Loveland plays, even if Jonah Jackson plays, are they going to be 100%, or are you getting a limited version of them? And it feels like against a team like the Commanders that are, maybe not like first place in their division, although the Eagles keep slipping, so maybe they will be eventually, but like, they're still a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. And your margin of error of like, well, Loveland's a step slow or Jonah Jackson's a step slow, like, that can be a big difference in a game like this. And then in the running game, like with the running backs, if Monangai can't go, then does Roschon Johnson get carries? Does Travis Homer get carries? Or do we just see DeAndre Swift get it 25 times and no other running back touches the ball in the ground game? Like, I could see them maybe using Travis Homer in the passing game a little bit more, just because we've seen him be a little bit of a receiver over the course of his career, but he feels more to me like a special teams guy. Like, that's kind of his role here. Like, I don't feel good. Like, if Monangai's not out there, I don't really trust the other backs to do much with the ball when you give it to him, and that's not a great way to solve the running game. And the other challenge in there is, just like we talked about with Austin Booker, Travis Homer's on injured reserve. If you're going to activate him for this game, you have to clear another roster spot for him somewhere else. So do you, I threw the name out earlier, like, do you cut Ja'Day Walker at wide receiver and say, hey, we're pretty good on receiver depth right here, and we can stick Walker on the practice squad, so you'll cut Walker and bring Travis Homer back off injured reserve and call it good to go? Or, heaven forbid, like, does does Roschon Johnson get cut at this point? I mean, he doesn't even see the field on offense. So in some ways, like if you're going to give Travis Homer the playing time over him while Monangai is also hurt, then kind of what's he doing on your 53-man roster at this point? Like I'm not predicting that's going to be the move they make, but I don't think we can rule it out as a possibility. I would just think he's got talent and they should try giving him the ball, even if he's not going to thrive with it. I think at this point with the running game, see what you can do, try everything. And if you haven't tried that, then, it's worth giving it a shot. And if it doesn't work well, it's not like it's going to be worse than what you already got, which isn't really working much at all there. So concerns at all three of these spots that are not as major concerns as like, backup safety, rookie right tackle, or defensive tackles out again, the way that the guys that we're pretty sure are probably going to miss some time there. But it's just, it's hard to come out of the bye week thinking like, all this health and recuperation, because it feels like one step forward with Edwards and Gordon and 2 or 3 steps back with Brisker and Wright and Jarrett and Monangai and Jonah Jackson being limited and Loveland's still not where you was hoping he'd be 100% good to go. And maybe that's just wishful thinking at the time because we don't know how long these injuries are supposed to last, but it's a little bit frustrating when like one of the whole goals of this time was to get healthier, and it doesn't really feel like the Bears were able to do that. And that's no one's fault. It just feels like, well, it's kind of tough luck right now. Imagine if they didn't have the bye week, how banged up they would have been in week 5 had they played. Like, oh man. So I guess, in some ways it can still come at a good time, even if it doesn't produce all of the results we're wanting for. I still leave the door open for, hey, practice on Friday as this podcast comes out, practice on Saturday. Maybe they can add some more good news. Maybe Loveland is a full participant. Maybe Jonah Jackson's a full participant. Maybe Kyle Monangai practices again, or Jaquan Brisker practices again. And you're like, okay, maybe it's not as bad as we think, but it starts out not great. And I think it's worth preparing for the possibility that, hey, a couple starters come back, but 2 or 3 more backups go in, and that's NFL football. It's a durability game. It's availability is the best ability, and Bears aren't having enough of that right now in the process. Certainly, it's going to shape the Commanders game one way or another, and whatever happens, you can be sure we're going to break it down for you right here in the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen once again. Come on back, make us your first listen on Monday before the Commanders game. The plan right now, barring some big breaking news over the weekend, I'd like to kind of check in on Caleb Williams' development and how it compares to the other rookies in this draft class, because everybody's doing it and not everybody has a fair evaluation of Caleb Williams. So I kind of want to say, like, okay, like, where is he compared to Jaden Daniels, who hasn't been as good this season as he was last season? Still a very good player, but, hasn't been this rocket ship trajectory. Bo Nix is on a really good team, but is he really doing a lot better? I think the answer there is not as clear and obvious either. I think there's been some criticism of Bo Nix not taking that next step. Drake May's looking really great all of a sudden. So all of a sudden, is he jumping in this race? I want to deep dive on this quarterback class a little bit, and I think we'll find Caleb Williams is right where he needs to be, but we'll look at it a little bit more closely on Monday's podcast. So make sure you coming back on Monday, make us your first listen once again. If you're looking for a second listen in the meantime, you can check out Lockdown NFL for all the coverage of Thursday Night Football, and every day it's all the top football stories with Tyler Rowland in the morning, and then a second episode comes out in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins hitting all the top football topics, or any of your other favorite Locked On Podcast Network podcasts. Locked On Cubs, fighting back in the playoff series against the Brewers, right? Like making it a close one. Tune in there, or your other favorite baseball teams, basketball teams, hockey teams, college sports teams. We've got it all covered for you elsewhere on the podcast network. Just coming back on Monday for more Bears talk here and another opportunity for you to bear down.